Hello, Broadway fans. It is Sam Eckmann, joined by David Buchanan and Susan Haskins, our Tony trio here at Gold Derby. And we are going to hash out our final predictions in the play categories for the 2022 Tonys. But before we do that, we have to get into some information that I've been hearing from people is that there are estimates out there, I've heard, specifically with the play categories, that this could be the lowest number of Tony voters eligible to vote in many of these categories in recent Tony history. The plays, most of them were situated in the fall. A lot of people weren't ready to come back to the theater at that point, given the pandemic. They weren't making travel plans. There are a lot of out-of-town voters. And so that's going to affect them. If you don't see a show, any category where that show is nominated does not appear on your ballot.
Yeah, the whole category
Yes,
is out if you don't
is
see
eliminated.
one person. Mhm.
Yeah, so
one
that can really take people out. And I would not honestly be surprised if less than half of the number of total voting pool, which hovers around 847, I think is the number. I wouldn't be surprised if it was less than half of them who are going to vote for a lot of these play categories.
So that's 300 voters.
Yeah, and that got me thinking, because if it's only 300, let's say, maybe less, maybe a little bit more, there's a lot more opportunity for surprises. And I think people have thought this was locked up. So let's start with Best Play. Best Play has had Lehman Trilogy out front for a long time. It's been the default front runner, and rightfully so. Huge acting showcase and a huge, design production showcase. Susan, do you think that's still, with our knowledge about the diminished voter pool, is that still solidly out front for you?
I absolutely think it's solidly out front. It is epic. And so much of it is the conception. I mean, the acting's great, but the conception, the design, it's one for the ages, and particularly also it's dealing with a very important, well, they're all dealing with very important subjects. What am I saying? But that they managed to put into this very interesting 3-person story theater spectacle the entire story of the collapse of the economy, and that's pretty great. Pretty smart.
David, anything taking down Lehman Trilogy for you?
I'm not sure. I mean, the point you raised, Sam, is well taken, and it is affecting some of the choices I'm making in the acting categories, for example. With this category, I'm just not sure what would emerge as the alternative. The Minutes, for example, that's the only nomination it has is in Best Play. I don't think it's going to win. Clyde's closed somewhat early in the season too, even though that did well elsewhere. And Hangman, kind of underperformed. It got, 2 of its actors in, but didn't pick up, a lot of other support. So I just don't see where the other kind of choice would emerge to take down Lehman Trilogy.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised about Hangman, because that's the one I thought could have a big moment, because Martin McDonagh hasn't won yet. And I sort of expected that and it's not that people don't like it, but I'm not hearing the same kind of passion for it as when people talk about something like the Lehman Trilogy of, oh, that show have to go see it. I think they really like Hangman, but they don't talk about it the same way.
Could any of that be that Hangman, which opened back off Broadway, it was at the Atlantic Theater, I believe, some time ago, that in the minds of many of the voters, it's almost like a revival. And so it doesn't have Pack the Wallop of the new, although Pack the Wallop, when we all first saw it, maybe that Lehman Trilogy did.
Yeah. I've actually moved Clyde's up to number 2 just because of the Lynn Nottage factor. She's had an incredible season. And so if there was a challenger, I think she would be the one to do it, but I'm not sure that anything can take down Lehman at this point.
And Skeleton Crew is pretty great.
Yes.
But it's, as a workplace drama, I just don't think it's going to overtake something like a juggernaut like the Lehman Trilogy.
Right. Well, if the Lehman Trilogy is a juggernaut and is going to steamroll Best Play, Best Revival of a Play is really anyone's game, I think. All 5 are strong, but I think there's 3 that are out front with Take Me Out, For Color Girls, and How I Learned to Drive. And I can really make a convincing case for any of those 3. David, which one do you think is pulling ahead?
I have a different answer depending
Uh-oh.
on, you know, what day of the week you ask me. I have a different answer.
That's right.
You know, I've been toggling between those. I think the three you mentioned or we're going to mention is Take Me Out, For Colored Girls, and How I Learned to Drive. I'm not quite sure which I have out front right now. For Colored Girls did really well with nominations, but we have to be really wary of the fact that the nominating pool is so much smaller and distinct from the voter pool. So I don't want to kind of overestimate, well, you know, it got in so many key races that it must be out front. When How I Learned to Drive, the fact that Paula Vogel could win her first Tony for How I Learned to Drive, I think it's going to win one, if not both, of the, you know, lead acting categories. You know, that could be a really strong and viable option. So I'm not really sure, to be honest.
Yeah, Susan, what do you think?
I agree with those that those three are the top. For Colored Girls is also in part a dance. It's and I have heard some people who didn't respond, so they didn't like it, but they didn't love it the way they do Take Me Out, which, aside from the fact that it has a very dramatic, unhappy climax, is kind of fun. It is fun, and people love it. And it too was a Pulitzer Prize winner. I think it goes to How I Learned to Drive, and this is because of the woman who was sitting next to me. And when it got into the photography scene, okay, this was a young woman, very average looking young woman, and she put her hands up and she started to weep. She just started to weep. And by the end of How I Learned to Drive, which I saw way back when in 1997, but I forgot. I remembered the gist, but not the wild. I was weeping. I was undone by that play. It's so powerful, so powerful. And I wept. I also wept in Take Me Out, but not as much. I just wasn't as floored and devastated. So that's why I give it 2.
Yeah. Although I would say I was the most devastated in For Colored Girls. At many moments, I think definitely during Kenita Miller's final piece.
We're not it well, because I saw it back then too, young men.
But
and I was devastated by then Trezana Beverly's
right
performance as the woman in red, which is carried over here. That's where I was. Yes, I was that floored at that as well.
Yeah, I think sometimes with this, I have to separate my own aesthetic from what the Tony voters go for, because I think for Colored Girls, its potential weakness in terms of voting is that it's not a typical Broadway piece, as you said. It's a choreo poem. It combines a lot of different, more avant-garde types of storytelling, which sometimes people aren't used to seeing on Broadway. I really love that kind of downtown theater. It's not always what the Tony voters go for. And How I Learned to Drive, the Paula Vogel factor is very real. She's, you know, the only one of these playwrights that's actually on the ballot because of the new classics rule that they have. But Take Me Out feels, in a way, the one that has the most upbeat parts, the one that feels like it's most like a Broadway play and maybe not an off-Broadway play. And I do wonder if that's going to help it pull ahead.
No, and while I was watching, because I went back to How I Learned to Drive before I went back. No, excuse me. I went back to Take Me Out before I went back to How I Learned to Drive. So I'm thinking in Take Me Out, oh, this is going to get it. This is going to get it. And then I went back to How I Learned to Drive and thought, no. And remember, How I Learned to Drive was not deemed appropriate for Broadway back in the day. So even though For Colored Girls, at the same time, they did say, oh, well, we'll bring this to Broadway. Not How I Learned to Drive. They said, no, this isn't Broadway material.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
It's hard because basically every revival I saw, I was like, this one's going to win. Oh, no, wait, this one. Even Trouble in Mind, I thought was phenomenal and thought that was going to win back in the fall when I saw it. It's hard. I think I have Take Me Out right now. I've been waffling between the three of them, but I've had For Colored Girls all season long, so I can't feel like I can't let go of it in that #1 spot.
I'll just say one more thing. The thing about How I Learned to Drive is it's really uncomfortable. So and Take Me Out, he varies it. that Greenberg releases you at times, totally at the end, whereas unrelenting, How I Learned to Drive, you are just not going to feel better.
Well, we should look at the director race too, because only 2 of the revival candidates have a directing nomination, which is Camille A. Brown and Neil Pepe for American Buffalo. Does that mean one of them does Camille's directing nomination mean she has like a slight edge there? The production has a slight edge?
No.
No.
And Neil Pepe, and he was a wonderful director and the artistic director of the Atlantic Theater Company. I just think Sam Mendes takes it again, because he directed that thing, that spectacle.
Yeah, it's huge.
Like Ben-Hur or something, you know. it's that, what's newer than Ben-Hur? It's that big.
Gladiator. That's new. I don't know. But I agree that Sam Mendes will win director again. I'm just wondering if Camille A. Brown showing up there when, you know, How I Learned to Drive did not get a directing nomination. Take Me Out, I thought Scott Ellis would get a directing nomination. They did not. Does that mean For Color Girls has like a leg up in the revival race? I don't know. It could help them. David, do you think that means anything for that race?
I would in the sense that it's usually helpful and to see that kind of support. But the thing about How I Learned to Drive is I don't think anybody expected Mark Brokaw to get nominated. Not because it's not well directed, but you know, the fact that he wasn't on there wasn't a surprise to many people. So I wouldn't hold that against How I Learned to Drive to say, well, it underperformed and it should have gotten in. You know, it wasn't anticipated to, even though, you know, it's really well done. It really, you know, guiding those performances back into place after 25 years and to new heights, you know, I think that's the kind of accomplishment, and probably will get the two actors trophies.
So they thought, oh, he's already done the work. In the sense, he did the work, but he already created this piece, whereas Mendes created it, this season, last season.
Well, I don't know if they're going to win both of them. Let's get into the acting races, because I was just about ready to finally go with the herd and give up my Deirdre O'Connell prediction and go with the front runner, who's Mary Louise Parker. But when I'm thinking about like this low pool of voters, we could have just a couple hundred voters deciding this. That means they all definitely saw Dee Dee do her thing. And I think it is such an incredible thing to be surprised nowadays. And you have literally never seen a performance like this. It has never been done. And yes, it's been closed. It happened way back, and I think I saw it in October or something, but it has still stayed burned in my mind throughout all of that time. And might they just say, well, we just awarded Mary Louise Parker for what we thought was like her best career achievement with The Sound Inside. I thought that was the best thing I'd seen her in at that point. So are they going to go with Mary Louise again? Or will they say, you know, Deirdre O'Connell is such an institution of this New York theater industry, let's let her have her moment? Susan, you were on that train with me. Are you still on that train?
I was, absolutely. I held on to stay out of the pack for a really long time, thinking, oh, I'll have Deirdre O'Connell. She deserves it. What a wonderful innovation. And the last time we met, I talked about that. But since then, I went back to How I Learned to Drive and watched Mary Louise Parker's performance, where she goes from being a young adolescent all the way to a very traumatized adult and all over. And although Deirdre's wonderful, and she's my only other contender in this category, although that everybody's great, that I finally said, no, I think even though there's the factor of she won last year, and I find this a far stronger performance than she in the play she did last year. I mean, that was good, but this is so powerful. And Deirdre was powerful, but Deirdre was interpreting in this way. I don't want to take away from Deirdre being so great, but yes, I have joined the pack. And now I believe on goldderby.com, I'm the only person among the Tony experts. No, there's only one person among the Tony experts who is not predicting Mary Louise. And I have now jumped into the group that's with them.
Here's my take. I totally agree with you, Sam, that like Deirdre's giving a performance that you would think like Tony voters would acknowledge because it's so unique and so memorable. And you're right that if you're voting in that category, you have to have seen her. My only concern is that kind of recency of who you saw, like Susan is saying, the fact that a lot of these voters maybe saw Mary Louise Parker in the last 4 weeks or so, you know, whoever's coming now, no matter how much you love, I mean, Sam, you have a very good memory and, you know, she's staying top of mind for Dana H. But if you saw that in the fall, because you had to have, because it closed in, I think, November or so, you know, the recency of How I Learned to Drive, I think might just sway enough of those voters to pick Mary. But Mary Louise. But I do think it is a very tough race. I do not think it's a slam dunk for Mary Louise Parker.
What you say, David, could also be said about LaChanze, who gives a terrific performance back in
Trouble in Mind, and it's her first time nominated but
that was then. That was a while ago, and whereas, as you just said, you've just seen Mary Louise.
Well, I guess I'm just gonna lead the DD fan club, and that'll be my
I'm
role.
not leaving the DD. I think she was magnificent. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's look at Mary Louise's co-star, David Morse. He's also been out front, but there are starting to be some breakaways at Gold Derby predicting Simon Russell Beale for the Lehman Trilogy. And if the Lehman Trilogy is this big behemoth, it would make sense for it to scoop up an acting win along with it for one of those 3 men. All 3 of them are nominated. Do you think, David, that hurts him? Or are you going with David Morse still?
I think it hurts a bit. I am going with David for now. I do think Simon is the alternative. I have Simon in second. And my problem with it is just, I can imagine there are fans of the Lehman Trilogy who would vote for the other 2 men in the category. You know, does Simon have enough of the Lehman support to overtake not just his co-stars, but also David, who kind of stands alone? You know, I'm not sure. So I think Simon is a good kind of second, but I think I'm going to stick with David just because I don't know personally. Like, I don't know who I would vote for of the 3 Lehman actors.
I would vote for, but I think the 3 will cancel each other out. And I agree that Simon Russell Beale would be the one most likely to break out of the pack. My favorite was Adam Godley, who did that wonderful twist, the wonderful destroying the economy twist at the end of the thing. Such a fabulous actor. He's and we've been seeing him for years. He's a wonderful, fabulous actor. I just think that with the 3, they're an ensemble. So people may choose to vote for David Morse. At one point, I got into this thing where I thought, oh, well, maybe they'll all vote for Sam Rockwell, but now I'm off of that.
I think that Sam Rockwell gives a highly physical performance.
He does.
Like, he's a very engaging person to watch on stage. I don't know if he's a favorite as much as the other 2, but I have him in 3rd place right now. I think he could be like, if you're looking for like a dark horse upset, it would probably be Sam Rockwell.
I looked it up, and you know that part that he plays, because there have been 4 American Buffaloes on Broadway. Barbara Duvall, Al Pacino, John Leguizamo, and now Sam Rockwell. Never before was that part nominated. Pacino got a drama desk, but that was it. So that's pretty interesting. But he was the break. But then to me, David Morse again, such a sensitive performance of a very on some levels makes a dislikable character. I know everybody says this, but it's true. He gives us compassion for a dislikable character. It's really remarkable. That's in the script too, but he's great.
Yeah. Well, I want to move on to the featured races because featured actress, I thought Kenita Miller just had in the bag, and I've had her out front the whole time. It seems like people are now going in all 5 or 6 directions in that category. And I've heard a lot of different predictions. Kenita she stayed in that show until
she got pregnant,
until 5 days before she gave birth. I
believe.
believe
she gave birth already.
She did have her baby, so congratulations to Kenita.
That's pretty cool.
Pretty cool to to have that experience on stage. But does that mean, the final couple weeks, was it final week or a week and a half of the show, she wasn't in?
That's
So
right.
there
And
could potentially be some stragglers who caught, voters who caught the show late who didn't see her.
but then that works in her favor. And this is why, as you know, they can, if Kenita Miller is out, and the road voters were in, a lot of them after Kenita left. And if they don't see her, they cannot vote on the entire category. So those who had already seen her performance, and of course, that is a winner role. I mean, not to take anything away from her performance, but again, I'll never get. I always say Trezana Beverly because she was not recognized enough as an actress. She's still out there, and I wish they'd look her up and hire her. But that's a winning role. But if they missed, if the road voters, and apparently there are 100 of them or so, if they missed her, they can't vote at all. So then that works in her favor because the only ones voting are the ones who saw her.
Well, but that portion of the rules is on the honor system.
No,
technically. Oh, I thought that one, because the portal that the Tonys generate based on attendance is based on the show, based on the date you saw it.
Oh.
They ask you if you did not see everyone that day. So for instance, we've had a lot of people out with COVID. Kenita, took maternity leave from this. If you haven't seen a performer that was nominated, then you are asked to recuse yourself from that category. But they don't have, the portal won't take that, category out of your ballot.
I misunderstood my parsing of the rules that I got from the publicist for the Tonys. And I thought that now somehow that they could discern, but they could discern because you log in when you were there. So they know if you saw it when Kenita Miller wasn't there.
I think the producers have to go back in, or their team has to go back in and double check.
Don't you think they will?
I think they will, but I mean, it seems like that could be a space where
it's a space, but I think if the producers, as you and I were discussing before we started, a lot of these rules are driven by the producers. You would think they would go in and say, wait a minute, you saw For Colored Girls when Kenita wasn't there.
Right.
Anyway.
Well, so if it's not Kenita, David, who do you have out front? Do you have someone spoiling?
I have had, this is maybe a surprising choice, but I've had Felicia Rashad in number 2 or even number 1. Before For Colored Girls started previews, I had Felicia Rashad top of the list because that is really a big role in Skeleton Crew. It could have been in the lead actress category. It really dominates the show, and it's a very commanding performance. So, I had her in first and then second, and it's probably not going to happen. But she, I was thinking she could be a spoiler. My only concern about, I know a lot of people are picking Uzo Aduba for Clyde's. Her co-star is in the category too, and both of those roles are so good. And the performances are so great. Kara's performance is so great that, I personally, again, would have a hard time choosing between them.
Yeah, although Uzo has the big scene chewy role. I think she gets to just storm the stage and pop out of walls and over the counter, and there's a lot of inherent comedy in her character, which is really fun to watch. I actually think, speaking of comedy, if it's not Kenita, if she, falls out of the top spot, I think Rachel Dratch takes it.
That's right.
Despite having also has a co-star there with the incredible Julie White, but Rachel Dratch is just an unhinged, whirling dervish of insanity in the show. And I think it's really nice. She's worked in theater, a fair amount, and she has this legacy on SNL, and it feels like she's finally having this moment that's really all hers. Instead of being part of a big, SNL group, it's even though everyone in POTUS is outstanding, she is just absolutely insane. And so I think even though it's not nominated for Best Play, I think she could manage a win.
That would be wonderful. And she started at Second City in Chicago, and then she came here with Tina Fey. They had an act, I believe, was called Fey and Dratch, and then they got on the SNL, and the world evolved. Yeah, that would be great. Because talk about popping in and out with comedy. That's right.
I think it's probably, out of all the performances here, I think the one that is most talked about, to be honest, is Rachel Dratch.
That's one that I mean, that would be. That would be a
So,
thrilling spoiler.
I'm almost ready to like push her in front of Kenita Miller, because I also can't get Kenita's performance out of my head, but I may in the last moments, well, right before the prediction center closes, switch Rachel Dratch
I may too.
over to the winner.
Yeah.
It would be very well deserved. Before we go, we should look at some design categories, since those are always kind of confusing and no one really knows what to do with them. Scenic design, Lehman has seemed like it's out front the whole time, but is it really a lock when you have these other behemoth sets that also have these huge surprises from Skin of Our Teeth and Hangman? David, what are you looking? Susan, you have a reaction there.
No, you go ahead.
Completely wrong?
No, I was just going to, no, Skin of Our Teeth. I told you I make a sign where I say, don't be mean. That I was not taken with Skin of Our Teeth.
No.
I was not. And that's a play I was very familiar with. I've known for years, but I was not taken with that production. And to me, you go, well, if you have fabulous things in service of production that doesn't work, then is that fabulous thing? Am I going to vote for that fabulous thing, or am I voting for the Lehman Trilogy? And I'm looking for a Lehman Trilogy sweep that's in service of a very effective production.
I think the Skin of Our Teeth production design is quite spectacular. You know, that's a standout. I think even, Susan, to your point, if some people, and not everybody loved this production, you're right, there are quite a few people that didn't love the production. You know, I think even if you weren't taken with this show, you know, the production design is just kind of awe-inspiring. So I think that could be, I think that's in my number 2. I am sticking with Lehman just because I think it's what they do with the set, just like mechanically and directorially, what they do with that set is very impressive. And like you said, Susan, too, I'm a bit wary of, I know voters are usually very discerning, but we have also seen some of these shows where it just picks up momentum and takes some of these categories where, yeah, there might have been a stronger contender or somebody that, you know, we suss out has, you know, better components, but they just, you know, really love it and tick it off. I'm thinking, like, for example, and this is an anomaly of a year, but last year, I don't think anybody expected Christmas Carol to just dominate, you know, these below the line categories.
Right. That's right.
But it did. And then, not to say that it wasn't deserving, but, you know, you really kind of pour over these decisions like, oh my God, which of it could it be? This one for this. And then they just said, we love this production, you know, here. So that could be the same this year too.
But could I ask you, David, going back to the Skin of Our Teeth, might not the meaning of the play been more effective if they had not thrown hundreds of thousands of dollars at costumes and set? Because for me, with having studied the play, I thought I would have liked to see it on a very simple set, and which is how Wilder intended it in the first place, and not all that stuff. You know,
yeah.
I thought, throw the money into the fire pit. Just throw money into the fire pit. I mean, I thought that in a way that worked against it.
Oh, interesting.
That's a fair point.
I thought it helped contextualize it for now, and it. I appreciated the design in it, and that's why I think it is a huge design juggernaut. It has a lot of like wow factor when you walk into the theater.
Huge, yeah. And the dinosaur and the man, blah, blah, blah. No, huge. Yeah.
The dinosaur puppeteer should get a special.
Yes, that's a
citation.
special.
That was great. But so in that case, Susan, do you think Skin of Our Teeth is out front for costume design? Is it winning that, or do you think could Plaza Suite take its only nomination? Because that's kind of the type of costumes that normally win here, but it's hard to win on your only nomination.
I've thought about this category a lot, and frankly, I can't even predict. And to me, if I were voting for which design served the play the best, it would be Clyde's. Seriously, that the people working in the sandwich shop costumes were more, because you had Jane Greenwood doing these fabulous costumes for Sarah Jessica Parker. Well, okay, and Skin of Our Teeth, but was that in service of the message of, service message of play? And when I'm taking it as a play, but I don't know. I really don't know what the voters are going to go with on that. You're probably right, Skin of Our Teeth, but maybe Plaza Suite. I don't know. Could everybody get into Plaza Suite?
I would put Plaza Suite. If you're predicting Skin of Our Teeth, put Plaza Suite and like, don't put it any lower than second or third.
Oh, I'm not
Yeah.
predicting it.
I think you have to move that up. I think you're exactly right, Sam. I think that's one that that could surprise. Like you said, it's only a nomination, but that costume design, and it's Jane Greenwood. I know she waited a long time. I know she waited a long time to win, but you know, she's picking up momentum now. So maybe, you know.
Yeah.
I agree.
It's difficult to win on your only, that's my hesitation with it. If Plaza Suite had even like 3 nominations, I would probably immediately put it as number 1, but it's hard to win as your only one. You had a good Susan with Clyde's. I remember watching Clyde's and actually saying to my partner, like, oh, the costume is so smart in this, even though it's not what we think of as what normally wins this category, which is like period piece and you know, frilly gowns and stuff. It's not that, but like the way they've dressed Uzo in this is fabulous.
So you think that because I was thinking of like how they dress the little kitchen workers, but you're right.
Well, that too. But
it served the message of the play rather than saying, don't think about the play. Don't
it's
think
all
about
the character.
play. Think about the costumes.
Yeah. Well, I want to jump into one more thing, which will keep me on the Dana H train here, because sound design is actually this category. The sound categories are determined by a smaller pool of voters, the experts on sound, because that's how they brought it back, because there were some voters who said, I don't know how to judge this. I'm not qualified to judge this. With that in mind, does Dana H have a shot to overtake the behemoth that is Lehman Trilogy? Because it's really one of the most obvious uses of sound. The play would not work without the sound design.
No, I don't. I take that out of my Lehman sweep. I think that Dana H should get for sound. That's just amazing what they did.
Yeah,
having a real person's voice come out of the star's mouth and so convince us that we don't even remember after 5 minutes that the actress isn't talking.
And was essential to her performance too, because she had to hear it in her ear. So it really, as phenomenal as Deirdre O'Connell was, the whole thing also wouldn't have worked without the way they constructed that sound.
That was brilliant.
Before we go, can we get a quick poll on who we're predicting for featured actor? We didn't do featured actor, did we? Because this category is giving me tremendous
you are right.
Worry.
Sorry, I was pulled into Lehman Trilogy Bonanza and went straight to design. We'll end with featured actor, David, because I originally thought this was just Jesse Tyler Ferguson. He would steamroll it, even though Chuck Cooper was fabulous back in the winter. But I'm hearing a lot of support lately for Jesse Williams.
Yes.
A lot lately. And do we think he is suddenly the new frontrunner?
I wouldn't be surprised. I thought, and now being a theater geek, I had never seen Jesse Williams do anything. I never watched Grey's Anatomy. He was on, I don't know. And then this guy, and yes, Jesse Tyler Ferguson is wonderful in the part that won, help me.
Dennis O'Hare.
Thank you so much. Yeah. His Tony. But then here's this guy, and in the scenes where his eyes are filled with tears, and he's so powerful and intense. And I'm thinking, wait, that's the one.
And he's kind of the lead of the show. You could make an argument that he could have belonged in lead actor. So he kind of has the most material out of anyone. I would say the structure of Jesse Tyler Ferguson, the other Jesse, his part, those monologues are so beautiful, and it's such an easy thing to stand out in your mind. And often that's what you need in order to actually pull out a win, is it all comes down to that one moment that sticks with people that you can think back to. And Jesse Tyler Ferguson has about 3 of those. But Jesse Williams does a great job. David, have you switched from Jesse Tyler Ferguson?
I haven't, but my concern, again, I keep giving the same warning on all these categories, but my concern is with Jesse Williams now kind of rising and some support for Jesse Tyler Ferguson, and they have a third co-star in the category in Michael, who also I've heard, a lot of people say how much they adored his performance of the whole ensemble. now I'm back to thinking of Chuck Cooper, because as you're saying, Sam, you know, standout moment, number one, in that show. And number two, like such a theater veteran. Like if you, if there is any kind of confusion over who you're going to support and take me out, or different people voting elsewhere, I could see a contingent of voters voting for Chuck Cooper for this performance and for his career. He's, you know, a remarkable theater mainstay.
And if you're talking about theater legends, Ron Cephas Jones is there with Clyde, who had an amazing role, who Chuck Cooper has won. He's only been nominated once for The Life, but he won for The Life.
Right.
This is Ron Cephas Jones' first nomination. And he is, you know, his work with Labyrinth Theater is such that he's extremely high regarded in this industry. And so I think like he could be one of those people where it was just a matter of time, like the nomination was the hardest part. And now he will be the benefit of the split vote between the Take Me Out men.
You were voting the What's Become a Legend. Ron Cephas Jones is so wonderful. It's not as what's the word, bombastic I'm looking for. That role doesn't have as much.
He's more quiet and laid back. He's kind of the guru of the
He has
group.
that great monologue at the end of the show too, though, when he's kind of explaining, you know, his backstory to the staff. That's a beautiful moment too.
That's beautiful. And Chuck Cooper, the whole two scenes, the lynching, and then amazing. Now, would Chuck Cooper suffer from the fact that that's one that they saw some time ago?
Perhaps.
Yeah,
perhaps.
But
that is such a strong category. It really is.
It really could be anyone. I think I'm sticking with Jesse Tyler Ferguson, but we'll see at midnight before the prediction center shuts down.
That's right.
What happens?
Are we all going to go back on?
Because it's a loaded category, so I think it could go really either way. It's turned into quite a race. Well, everyone watching, make sure you keep up with your predictions. See if you can out-predict us when it comes to the winners of the 2022 Tony Awards. We will be here on Gold Derby, bringing you all sorts of coverage until the day. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, David.